Good morning. Thank you all for joining us here today. Hope you are enjoying the summit so far. Welcome to T-30, the world's first climate action summit. Today we'll be looking at emerging technologies in climate, food, and agriculture, as well as hearing from those leading action-oriented climate strategies. I am your host, futurist Amelia Coleman. As a futurist, it's my job to know about the latest new and coming technologies and their potential impact on the future of business, as well as the future of our lives. And it is a true honor to be joined by so many brilliant minds here in the room, as well as joining us online. Today, between now and 4 o'clock, you are welcome to curate your own content, moving between tracks as you like. And there will be time for questions after the speakers and panelists. So if you want to have a think about the questions you'd like to ask, you can submit them online or just raise your hand. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first headline speaker. Joel Myhre is the Senior Disaster Management Specialist at the Pacific Disaster Center. He'll be presenting on 2 decades of global climate change, adaptation, and disaster risk reduction innovations. Please welcome Joel.
Thank you so much. Everyone can hear me okay? Aloha, aloha. So we're gonna make this a little bit interactive. I'm mindful that I know you might have had coffee and we're gonna be having lunch later. It's a real honor to be here, and of course you can kind of see the overview of what we do. I'm still mastering the technology, and I really want to say a word of thanks to Amelia, to Amy, to Sarah, Vidya, and the team, to Fiona, who you've seen putting this together. We're really all family. We've been doing this for 5 years. Since I met the team in 2017. It's so timely with COP26 and other important climate change events coming up where we really need to all get busy and get on with the work. And that's something that PDC has done for over 20 years, almost 25 years at this point. Again, I'm Joel Myhre, and I'll be speaking for about 15, 20 minutes, then we'll do some questions. But some context, again, my background is in public policy and applied science, and the PDC is an applied research center at the University of Hawaii. What I'd also like to have everyone do is kind of be a part of this, so please retweet, please use the hashtags you've seen, but we are at PDC_global. So I don't mind if you look at your phones, so please feel to retweet that as well. I also want you to learn a few words, and we're gonna start out with this word, which is aloha. Can everyone say aloha? Aloha, which means hello in the Hawaiian language. Of course, we are part of the Polynesian Triangle, which is, nothing is lost in terms of climate change in Polynesia. It's the largest aquatic community in the world, the last great migration of humanity. This is kind of an overview of what we do, and we're going to learn a few words today. Again, starting with aloha. The second word is ohana. Can everyone say ohana? Ohana. We're all family, and I really think when we talk about applied science and working with the Inspired Minds team, we've been family for a long time. We work from intelligent health and AI to disaster risk reduction. So with that in mind, you're all now part of this ohana. And I want you to kind of take a look at some of our website, take a look at pdc.org, retweet at pdc_global. And this is some context on how we do data, decision-making, technology for early warning, and what we call disaster risk reduction. So that's kind of who we are. We've been around for a while. We partner with the United Nations. I was just in Geneva for over a few weeks, meeting with our colleagues. We're so delighted to have colleagues here that were dialing in. Oliver Morgan from WHO yesterday with Intelligent Health, Ambassador Amandeep Singh with IDARE dialed in just an hour ago. And this is what we do. We take a lot of different data on how do you get remotely sensed data, satellite imaging, historical data. We put it into our platform, which please take a look on your apps, your app store. You can look at Google, or you can also look on Apple. We have Disaster Alert, and put in Disaster Alert PDC. I don't mind if you look down at your phones. And we bring in over 5,000 data layers, and we allow you to make decisions. So it's really something when you're traveling, if you want to see what is a cyclone doing, earthquakes. We're responding to over 33 different types of disasters. So that's a context on what we do. And we're also doing data for decision making. So we're looking at the idea of utilities, environmental, emergencies, demographics, economics. And that's so interesting when you look at the important work done here in the Netherlands in terms of data and innovation. And that's why it's so important to be here. Mastering the technology. In terms of our work globally, don't let the name Pacific fool you. We're global. We started 25 years ago in the Pacific, but we're very busy in Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa. And this is where we do our work looking at subnational disaster risk reduction plans. And before we actually respond to a disaster, and we have a response team working globally, we have to get ready for the disaster. And we're data-driven, and AI is a big part of that. This is our colleague at the ASEAN Center, the AHA Center, doing disaster risk reduction. And again, we have staff there in Jakarta. We have staff in Brazil. We have staff in Thailand. And this is what's so interesting, how we can take all this data and make sense of it. So when a cyclone is coming into Indonesia or to Thailand, right now we have a cyclone that just went over the Southeast Asia region, we want to make decisions, and AI is a big part of that. We were very busy this last year, one of the busiest years of our lives, working, like all of us, with COVID-19. Our disaster map is something that's a big part of that. We partner. AI is not something that we're experts at. We partner a lot with colleagues who are good at it. Facebook Data for Good, Salesforce, Tableau. And so we're really proud of those partnerships, from NGOs to the United Nations. We signed this last year a partnership with the International Federation of the Red Cross, Red Crescent. I myself worked at WHO previously for the last decade. This is my third pandemic. I did H1N1. I did a lot of the first maps that you saw for Ebola 14, 15. So this one's personal, but this one thing about COVID, as the old phrase says, don't let a disaster go to waste. I think it's brought us all together, and I'm excited to get your questions, because I'm actually up here, and I always make this pitch on behalf of Dr. Aaron Huey, my boss, and of course our executive director is an AI scientist. Ray Shirkadai, our executive director, started doing AI before people knew what AI was. And we're really blessed. Again, we're only 50 people, and we are growing our team, wink, wink. I'm always saying, if you wouldn't be remiss to come to Hawaii and work with us, we do have a global team, so I'm always putting that out there. And the last piece, I should always say, we have a lot of great academics here. We have a great internship program. So if you have young interns or people like me that are a bit more seasoned that want to intern with us, we'd love to entertain that as well. We want to build capacity. But again, we do a lot of regional and subnational disaster risk reduction work. And of course, we work throughout Southeast Asia, but globally. This is what's so interesting in terms of early warning, and we're part of this anticipation hub, working with the IFRC and of course working with the World Bank and UNDRR. The best way, and I used to say, yes, we're really good at what we call Band-Aids. We respond to disasters, but the best way to stay healthy is take your vitamins. And I think that's going to be a big part of this AI with T-30, the idea that AI can help us prepare and prepare for climate change and respond accordingly. So this is something we do, funded by USAID, working on early warning for things like floods. Floods are often the biggest disasters, and cyclones that come with that. And this is our work, of course, in the Philippines, looking at priority guidance. The demographics, when COVID-19 hit, how did we prepare? We knew early on it was affecting our elderly communities more. So we want to know the demographics, and are there enough hospital beds? And that's something that is going to be continuing as we go forward. Again, this is so interesting. We signed an MOU with a really fascinating company, Blue Dot. Blue Dot out of Canada was one of the first to pick up the signals out of Wuhan, and it was using AI along with the team out of WHO, the Alert and Response Operations team, which I used to be a part of. But we need the AI, and as we said, we need intelligent AI, we need fair AI, we need equitable AI, we need privacy-preserving AI. So that's where I know we at PDC look forward to learning from all of you. But Blue Dot is a great partner, and it's showing us how Blue Dot is founded. They're really good at looking at things like Ebola, a hemorrhagic fever, Zika. They train their models on that, and then COVID-19 was a very important win for them, and we have their data integrated into our platform. In terms of connecting regions, this is really interesting. We can actually put it down onto that app that I think some of you are downloading. Again, Disaster Alert PDC. You can find the app on the App Store. And this idea that we get the right data, the bane of my existence as a disaster manager is getting the right data at the right time to the right people to make the right decision. So hopefully that's something, it gives you an idea of what we try to do every day in real time. And of course, over to, again, the key features of disaster where we can have collaborative situation reports, population. If a disaster happens and there's no people, that changes the response. Observations, forecasts, spatial maps, and of course, we always want to make it compatible. We share data with partners from UNICEF to the World Food Program in Rome and elsewhere. This is really exciting. We took the Facebook high-resolution data, that their population data at 30-meter resolution, and we refined our entire global model. And it allows us, when we know a disaster is coming and there's a flood that might be coming to the Netherlands, we can draw a box around it and tell the first responders that, hey, in a couple days when the flooding increases, this is the type of evacuation. There'll be a lot of elderly. You evacuate differently. I am from Los Angeles. I've worked with emergency management, fires and floods and earthquakes, and we're really lucky in Los Angeles, much like Amsterdam. We speak 80 languages. We might have law enforcement that speak a certain language that can go into a community and help them evacuate. So we want to emphasize our diversity. And of course, in Hawaii, we're very proud of having a very inclusive, young and women-led team. We all know that with the Inspired Minds team, women in AI is something that we want to emphasize. In terms of early warning, this is some of our great innovations, that the idea that you also don't just respond or react, that you can actually know ahead of time with our Smart Alert. This is great. On your phone, you can say, tell me when there's a tsunami, and tell me when if you're in Canada and there's an ice storm, if you're worried about rains and floods, it can tell you, so you don't have to stare at the map. You can say, send me a text. So you can say, if there's an avalanche near me, please send me an SMS. So disaster managers, we were on a call with the World Food Program just last night, and it's so interesting because we worked with them during the Ebola response, during Haiti recently. We were all very involved with the Haiti earthquake. And the tools, you want to let the tools and the AI do the thinking for you. So that's why it's an exciting time, and we're really happy to be here to show off our innovations. Asset tracking, so working with things like Doctors Without Borders, MSF. If they're deploying doctors from Geneva, a couple years ago we met with them, and we found out that they were giving all of their deployees our app. And a lot of their colleagues might be getting on a plane and they're flying to somewhere in Africa or Latin America, and our app was telling them, hey, when you land, there's a cyclone there, or there's something to kind of be mindful of. So we are really excited to partner with agencies that use our tools, and we'd like to partner more with all of you. This event brief is great. We've automated so much of this, and if you look down in the corner here, it's this idea that even as the volcano is erupting, we don't know much on the ground. Again, we've had a lot of volcanic activity. In fact, recently there's a volcano erupting, not only here in Europe and in some of the islands in the Atlantic, but in Hawaii we have a volcano as well. And it can tell us how to respond, how to react. And this is a bigger view of event brief. Population exposure, what kind of capital exposure? The funding, when they're looking around for funding contributions, this idea that we can actually get an idea of what kind of estimates do we give to the World Bank or the UN to help us out. And the breakdown of key needs, we might need this many liters of water, this many tarps or shelter. Shelter is always key, water sanitation, and help for those that are maybe more vulnerable. So I hope this kind of gives a good idea of what we do and how we do it. And of course, Event Brief is great. If right now I look on my phone and we have an earthquake and we have colleagues getting on planes to fly there, or local stakeholders, whether in Indonesia and Africa, Latin America, they can say, well, this earthquake that just happened, or volcano, this is the history of volcanic activity, so you know the context of the place that you're arriving. Context is everything. And you can also look at, are there travel advisories? When I go there, how's the best to travel, in this case to Indonesia? What's the weather like? And also, one of the big AI wins that was so interesting, I always say, there's young interns and colleagues that might be new students, but it's never too late to dive into AI. Our leadership who knew AI and has been studying it for a long time, Myhre, dove into this project where we're curating news globally and maybe picking up the right news that'll apply to this disaster. So we have AI, and again, as some of the speakers have said, AI is part of, not quite like Amazon, but we have AI in various parts of our organization, and we want to increase that. This is really interesting too, when we have traffic cameras, and that can give you the awareness, is it flooded in the street where we're going to be heading to? And this is really interesting. What are our partners doing on the ground? At the UN, we call it the 3 or 4 Ws. Who is doing what, where, is a big important thing. So when you land in central Vietnam, part of the response, you know that maybe USAID has already been there, or again, the United Nations, or maybe an NGO. And this is really, again, another context. In this case, it's a volcano in Indonesia. You can see the impact. You can see the exposure, the population there. How prepared were they to have this response. There may be a volcano happening in the context of a COVID response or another disease or even civil unrest. So it kind of gives you that insight on how to kind of respond. And I think it's, again, what are the components of the risk? You can say that, and USAID or WHO or the UN, they know that they don't want to send certain things there. They're fine, but maybe warehouses is what they need. Maybe they're fine with warehouses. Maybe education is the key challenge. So that's where we work closely with the United Nations and the cluster system to make sure water sanitation, emergency telecommunications, those are all key pieces of the puzzle. With that in mind, what can I say? This was a very busy year this last year. You can see the responses we did. We did 6 earthquakes, a lot of cyclones, floods, wildfires. I'm from California. It's been, every year is always exponentially more wildfires than before, and they're always bigger, hotter, more difficult to respond to. So we need, it isn't a luxury to have AI. We need the AI, we need the data, and whether it's AI and satellite mapping, AI for population movements, working with Facebook and other colleagues, COVID products, God, we did almost 1,000 COVID products, advising colleagues who had deployed to Afghanistan and elsewhere to give them that situation awareness. In fact, it's quite ironic, we've been around for a while. Since a hurricane had hit Hawaii in the early 90s, they created this center of excellence, and it was timely because they knew so much of the Asia-Pacific century was coming forward. You can see how much work we did just last year in terms of volumes of products. And as I get down, this is an idea. We also, again, do these joint products. We're so proud to partner. We have a global MOU with the World Food Program, UN OCHA, again, for coordinating humanitarian affairs. We were just with the OCHA team at the United Nations World Data Forum last week in Switzerland, and they do amazing things. In fact, they have a center for data analysis, AI, here in The Hague. And so it's a very exciting time globally, but especially to be here in Amsterdam, and to see this, as they say, this kind of continuum from industry to NGOs to analytical think tanks. It's really, for me, it's a privilege, and looking forward to meeting many of you. As you wind down on time here, this is what we call a JADE, a joint analysis of disaster exposure. Again, when we've seen the earthquake, this is where we can say, hey, what's the preparedness level? What's the extent of the earthquake? In fact, there was just an earthquake yesterday in Greece, and we were trying to follow that and see what the impact was. And here's what we can also do when a cyclone is coming across Southeast Asia. We know the impact level, we can model that, and AI is a big part of that. Let's model and see before we get there, and that'll help us not only assess before we deploy, but also do what we call an after action. What did we know when? How can we get better at this? Because we're gonna have to get better. You can also reach me. This is some of my contact information. Again, it's jmyhre@pdc.org. That's kind of an overview of what we do. We're coming right to time, and again, we'll pass it over to questions. And I'm really looking forward to the next panelists as well and learning from all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joel. That was great. We do have time for a few questions. If you'd like to raise your hand. Yep, there's one over there. We have a microphone coming to you.
Thank you for being brave, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll get you more coffee. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the really nice talk. I was wondering, perhaps I missed it, but do you guys also work together with states to actually, make this useful?
Boy, and you mean states meaning nations and
nation states.
Thank you so much, and boy, it was a whirlwind, and thank you because there's a lot to cover. That was a great question. We work with what we call the NDMOs, the National Disaster Management Organizations. In my case, I'm American, it'd be FEMA. In fact, we've had colleagues that we've hired that were former FEMA. We work closely, when we work at the national level, it's always with states parties. In fact, that's part of the debate. I'd like to say it's all easy. Data, data is always power. Data is not easy. To get the right data, to make sure that the open data is part of what we call humanitarian OpenStreetMap, or maybe with the HDX, we saw Javier Turan and the team in Bern last week. We want to have the data open, but data, we need to be mindful of privacy, and the best data is local. We spent most of last month, was very busy because we were working on the Afghan response with colleagues evacuating Haiti. And on the Haiti response, we were triangulating with the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, getting the right data from, again, the Ministry of Health. We go straight to Haiti and talk to the folks there that are experts in their data. And so I really want to emphasize that. That was a great question. You want to be mindful of people's privacy and mindful of people's data concerns, and also really respect local data. There's a big trend at the UN for localization. Again, you're not going to manage these disasters from Geneva, from London, from Hawaii. Wi-Fi only. We want to do it more localized. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
asking.
much. Yeah, I'm afraid we're out of time, but Joel, that was wonderful. Help me thank Joel one more time.
Thank you.